The rain hammered against the coffee shop window as I watched her sit alone at the corner table, stirring her latte with the same nervous energy I'd noticed 3 weeks ago. Victoria Chen wasn't the type of woman you'd expect to find in a place like Murphy's Cafe at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. But there she was. Designer heels kicked off under the table, reading what looked like legal documents by the dim overhead light. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I'd been coming to Murphy's every Tuesday night for the past month, not for the mediocre coffee or the stale pastries, but because my apartment felt too quiet after my divorce was finalized. The silence there reminded me of everything I'd lost, everything that had crumbled despite my best efforts to hold it together. Here, surrounded by the gentle hum of conversation and the hiss of the espresso machine, I could pretend I was still part of something larger than my own disappointment. Victoria had started appearing around the same time I did. At first, I assumed she was just another professional grabbing a late dinner after a long day at the office. Her tailored blazers and perfectly styled auburn hair suggested she belonged in boardrooms. Not in this modest neighborhood cafe where the chairs didn't match and the art on the walls was clearly painted by local high school students. But week after week, she kept returning, always alone, always with that same stack of papers that seemed to grow thicker each time. She'd order the same drink of vanilla latte with an extra shot and claim the same corner table where she could watch both the entrance and the street outside. There was something deliberately chosen about her isolation, as if she was hiding from something or someone. Tonight felt different. The usual composed mask she wore had slipped, revealing something raw underneath. Her normally pristine appearance showed signs of strain. A wrinkled sleeve, smudged mascara, hair that had been run through with anxious fingers. She wasn't reading the documents anymore, just staring at them as if they contained news she couldn't quite accept. I found myself standing before I'd made the conscious decision to approach her. 3 weeks of silent observation had created a strange intimacy between us, though she probably didn't even know my name. We were both refugees from our respective disasters, seeking shelter in the same unremarkable place. "Excuse me," I said, stopping beside her table. "I don't mean to intrude, but you look like you could use some company." She looked up. I saw her eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray with flecks of blue that seemed to shift depending on the light. For a moment, I thought she was going to dismiss me with the polite but firm rejection that successful women her age had perfected for situations exactly like this. Instead, she surprised me by gesturing to the empty chair across from her. "Marcus," I said, extending my hand as I sat down. "Victoria," she replied, her handshake firm but brief. "Though I have to warn you, I'm not exactly pleasant company tonight." Her voice carried the slight rasp of someone who'd been crying, though her eyes were dry now. There was something magnetic about her vulnerability. The way she seemed to be fighting to maintain control while everything inside her was clearly falling apart. "Neither am I," I admitted. "That's why I've been sitting alone in coffee shops." For the past month, instead of dealing with my own mess, she studied my face with the intensity of someone accustomed to reading people for a living. What kind of mess? The kind where you spend 15 years building a life with someone, only to discover they've been building a completely different life behind your back. The words came out easier than I expected. Maybe it was because she was a stranger, or maybe it was because her own distress made mine feel less pathetic by comparison. Victoria nodded slowly, as if she understood more than she was letting on. 15 years is a long time to invest in the wrong person. What about you? Nodding toward the documents spread across her table. "Those don't look like light reading," she laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Divorce papers, final settlement agreement, custody arrangements." She picked up one of the pages and let it flutter back down. 23 years of marriage, reduced to legal terminology and financial calculations. The number hit me like a physical blow. 23 years. That was longer than some people's entire adult lives. I thought my 15-year marriage had been a significant loss, but Victoria had invested even more time, more of herself, in something that was now being dismantled by lawyers and judges. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. Don't be. I'm the one who filed. She took a sip of her latte, which had to be cold by now. My husband. Reliable, successful, never forgot an anniversary or a birthday. He just ... stopped seeing me. Somewhere along the way, I became part of the furniture in his life. Necessary, but not particularly interesting. There was something achingly familiar about her description. The slow erosion of intimacy, the gradual transformation from lover to roommate to stranger sharing the same address. It was a common story, yet hearing it from her made it feel urgent and immediate. When did you know it was over? I asked Victoria. Was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the rain-slicked street. 6 months ago, we were at our daughter's college graduation. Sarah had just walked across the stage, and I turned to share the moment with him. He was checking his phone, work email. I realized I couldn't remember the last time he'd looked at me the way he was looking at that screen, like I was important, like I mattered. The pain in her voice was raw and honest. This wasn't someone looking for sympathy or validation. She was simply stating facts, trying to make sense of how something that had once been vital had slowly starved to death. That night I lay in bed next to him and felt more alone than I had when I was actually single. At least then, loneliness had possibilities. It felt ... permanent. I understood that feeling intimately. The suffocating certainty that this was it, that the best parts of your life were behind you. You'd somehow used up your allotment of passion and connection and would have to make do with whatever scraps remained. So you left, I said. Tried to fix it first, suggested counseling, planned romantic getaways, bought lingerie that stayed in the drawer with the tag still on. She smiled sadly. He went through the motions, but it felt like he was humoring me. Like I was asking him to pretend we were characters in a movie he didn't want to watch. The cafe was starting to empty out around us. The barista had begun. Her closing routine, wiping down the espresso machine and stacking chairs on tables, but neither of us moved to leave. There was something about this conversation, this unexpected intimacy with a stranger that felt too precious to abandon for the sake of convenience. What about you? Victoria asked. What was your breaking point? I thought about Sarah, about the night I'd come home early from a business trip and found her in our kitchen, laughing at something on her phone in a way she hadn't laughed with me in years. When I'd asked her about it, she'd deflected, but I'd seen the guilt in her eyes. That's when I knew there was someone else, someone who still found her delightful. I realized I'd become the person my wife had settled for, not the person she'd chosen. I said finally. There's a difference between being loved and being accepted. I wanted to be loved. Victoria reached across the table and touched my hand. Just briefly. Your fingers were warm despite the cold coffee cup she'd been holding. Do you think it's possible to feel that way again? Would it be someone's choice instead of their compromise? The question hung between us, loaded with possibility, and fear in equal measure. Here we were, two people who'd been discarded by the people who were supposed to love us most, wondering if we had enough left to offer someone new. I don't know, I said honestly, but I'd like to find out. She looked at me then with an expression. I couldn't quite read. There was interest there, but also wariness, as if she was calculating risks and benefits. We were both wounded, both carrying the weight of failed marriages and shattered assumptions about love and loyalty. The barista cleared her throat meaningfully. We both looked around to realize we were the last customers in the cafe. I should go, Victoria said, gathering her papers and sliding them into an expensive leather briefcase. Can I walk you to your car? I asked, standing as she did. She hesitated, and I could see her internal debate playing out across her features. This was the moment where strangers either remained strangers or became something more. The choice she made would determine whether this was just a brief encounter or the beginning of something neither of us had planned for. All right, she said finally. Thought I should warn you I'm not looking for anything complicated right now. We stepped out into the rain. I couldn't help but smile. After 23 years of marriage, after months of lawyers and custody arrangements, and the complete restructuring of her life, Victoria Chen thought a conversation over coffee was the complicated part. She had no idea what was coming. The rain had intensified by the time we reached the parking lot, turning the asphalt into a mirror that reflected the amber streetlights. Victoria's car was a silver BMW sedan, pristine and practical, exactly what I would have expected from someone who organized her life in legal documents and kept her emotions locked behind professional composure. She fumbled with her keys for a moment, 8 drops of rain catching in her hair like tiny diamonds. There was something endearing about seeing her usual confidence shaken by something as simple as wet hands and slippery metal. "Thank you," she said, turning to face me as we reached her car door. "For the company, I mean. I didn't realize how much I needed to talk to someone who understood." The space between us felt charged, electric in a way that had nothing to do with the storm overhead. We were standing close enough that I could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive that seemed to suit her perfectly. Close enough to see the uncertainty in her eyes. The way she was wrestling with wanting something she wasn't sure she should have. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Victoria," I started, but she held up a hand to stop me. "Don't," she said softly. "Say whatever you're about to say, because if you do, I might do something I'm not ready for." The honesty in her admission was devastating. Here was a woman who'd spent months making careful, calculated decisions about dismantling her marriage, suddenly confronted with something that couldn't be planned or controlled. The vulnerability of it made her even more beautiful than she'd been sitting in that cafe chair, composed and untouchable. I asked. No pressure, no expectations, just dot, in case you ever want to talk to someone who gets it. She studied my face in the dim light, searching for something I hoped she would find. After what felt like an eternity, she pulled out her phone and handed it to me. Her fingers brushed mine as I took it, a contact so brief it might have been accidental, but the way her breath caught suggested otherwise. I typed in my information and handed it back. "Marcus Reeves," I said. "In case you forget." "I won't forget," she said, and something in her tone made me believe her. She got into her car, but didn't start the engine immediately. Instead, she sat there for a moment, staring at her phone screen, where my contact information now lived. I waited, rain soaking through my jacket, unwilling to leave until she did. Finally, the BMW came to life, and she pulled out of the parking space. As she drove past me, she slowed down and rolled down her window. "Marcus," she called out over the sound of the rain. "Yeah. I haven't felt this nervous about a phone number since I was 16. Then she was gone, taillights disappearing into the storm, leaving me standing alone in the parking lot with something I hadn't felt in years. Anticipation. She didn't call that night or the next day. By Thursday, I'd convinced myself that our moment in the rain had been just that, a moment. Intense, but fleeting. The kind of connection that feels profound in the dark, but seems foolish in daylight. I threw myself into work trying to distract myself from checking my phone. Every few minutes, like a teenager waiting for his crush to text back. I was debugging code in my home office Friday evening when my phone rang. The number wasn't saved in my contacts, but I recognized it from the contact form I'd filled out in her car. "Hello?" I answered, trying to sound casual despite the way my heart rate had suddenly spiked. "It's Victoria." Her voice sounded different over the phones, smaller somehow, less certain than it had been in person. "I hope I'm not interrupting. Anything important? Nothing that can't wait?" I said, minimizing the code editor on my screen. "How are you holding up? That's actually why I'm calling." There was a pause, the sound of her taking a breath. "I've been thinking about what you said, about being someone's choice instead of their compromise." I waited, sensing she had more to say. "I met with my lawyer today to finalize some details, and he mentioned something about the property settlement that made me realize how completely I disappeared from my own life. For 23 years, every decision I made was filtered through what was best for the marriage. What was best for Richard? What was best for everyone except me?" The pain in her voice was evident, but there was something else too. A kind of awakening, as if she was discovering parts of herself she'd forgotten existed. The strangest part is, I don't even know what I want anymore. I know what I don't want. I don't want to feel invisible. I don't want to be taken for granted. Beyond that, she laughed, but it sounded more like a sigh. I feel like I'm starting from scratch at 47. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, I said. Starting fresh. No preconceptions, no old patterns to fall back on. Is that what you're doing? Starting fresh? The question caught me off guard. Was I? Or was I just treading water, hoping to find something that looked like my old life, but with different players? I'm trying to, I admitted. Some days I feel ready for whatever comes next. Other days I feel like I'm pretending to be someone I used to be. God, yes. The relief in her voice was palpable. Everyone keeps telling me how strong I am, how brave I am for leaving. But most of the time I feel like I'm just making it up. As I go along, we talked for over an hour. The conversation flowing with the easy intimacy of people who'd found an unexpected ally. She told me about her daughter Sarah, who was struggling to understand why her parents couldn't just work things out. I told her about the house I was trying to decide whether to sell, how every room held memories I wasn't sure I wanted to keep or let go. Can I ask you something? Victoria said as our conversation began to wind down. Of course. When you were married, did you ever feel like you were performing being happy instead of actually being happy? The question hit deeper than I'd expected. Yeah, I said quietly, especially toward the end. I got so good at going through the motions that I almost convinced myself it was real. That's exactly it. I became an expert at being the person I thought Richard wanted me to be. The perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect hostess for his business dinners. But somewhere along the way, I lost track of who I actually was underneath all that performance. Who are you? I asked. When you're not being what everyone else needs you to be? She was quiet for so long I wondered if the call had dropped. Then, I don't know, but I'd like to find out. We started meeting for coffee regularly after that, not at Murphy's. That felt too loaded with the weight of our first encounter, but at a small place called Grind Coffee downtown. It became our Thursday night tradition, a fixed point in both. Our weeks that we could count on. At first, our conversations stayed safely in the realm of shared experience. We compared war stories from our respective divorces, laughed about the absurdity of dividing up 20 years' worth of accumulated possessions, commiserated about well-meaning friends who kept trying to set us up with people we had no interest in meeting. But gradually, we began venturing into more personal territory. Victoria told me about her corporate job in marketing, how she'd climbed the ladder at a pharmaceutical company by being smarter and working harder than everyone around her. She'd taken only 6 weeks of maternity leave when Sarah was born, driven by a combination of ambition and financial necessity that she now questioned. I miss so much, she said one Thursday, stirring sugar into her cappuccino with more force than necessary. First steps, first words, first day of school, I told myself I was building something important for our family's future, but really I was just afraid of being ordinary. I shared my own regrets about prioritizing career over relationship. About the nights I'd stayed late at the office, not because the work couldn't wait, but because it was easier than going home and pretending everything was fine. We were both guilty of the same crime, choosing the safety of familiar dissatisfaction over the risk of pursuing something better. Do you think we would have been happier if we'd been braver? Victoria asked during our 5th coffee date. Braver how? Asking for what we needed. About admitting when things weren't working, instead of just enduring them. It was a question I'd been wrestling with since my divorce was finalized. Would my marriage have been salvageable if I'd been honest about my unhappiness sooner? Or were Sarah and I simply incompatible in ways that no amount of communication could have fixed? Maybe, I said. But maybe we needed to go through all of this to become the kind of people who could be brave. Victoria looked at me over the rim of her coffee cup, and I saw something shift in her expression. The careful distance she'd been maintaining began to crack, revealing something warmer and more immediate underneath. Marcus, she said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. Can I tell you something? I haven't admitted to anyone else. I nodded, sensing we were about to cross into territory we hadn't explored before. I think about you more than I should. The words came out in a rush, as if she'd been holding them back for weeks. When I'm alone in my apartment, when I'm lying in bed at night, when I'm sitting in boring meetings at work, I think about our conversations, about the way you look at me like I'm actually interesting. My heart started beating faster. Victoria, I know it's complicated, she continued, not letting me interrupt. I know we're both still figuring out who we are outside of our marriages. But I can't stop wondering what would happen if we stopped being so careful with each other. The air between us felt electric, charged with possibility and desire. We were sitting in a public place, surrounded by other people, but it felt like we were completely alone. The rest of the world had faded away, leaving only the two of us. And the question hanging between us, "What are you suggesting?" I asked, though I thought I knew. She reached across the table and took my hand, her fingers intertwining with mine. Her skin was warm, soft, and the simple contact sent electricity up my arm. "I'm suggesting we stop pretending this is just friendship," she said. "I'm suggesting we find out what happens when two people who've forgotten how to be desired remember. What it feels like to want someone." Her thumb traced across my knuckles, such a small gesture, but one that felt impossibly intimate. I could see her pulse beating in the hollow of her throat, could sense the nervous energy radiating from her despite her brave words. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Because once we cross this line, we can't go back to being just coffee shop confessions." She smiled then, the first genuinely happy smile I'd seen from her since we'd met. "I've been playing it safe for 23 years, Marcus. I think it's time I took a risk." The following Saturday, I found myself standing outside Victoria's apartment building at 7:30 in the evening, holding a bottle of wine and questioning every decision that had led me to this moment. We'd agreed to have dinner at her place, significant escalation from coffee shop conversations, but now that I was here, the weight of what we were attempting felt overwhelming. Her building was in the historic district, a converted warehouse, with exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows that probably cost more per month than my mortgage payment. It suited her perfectly, sophisticated, carefully chosen, slightly intimidating to someone like me, who still bought furniture from big-box stores. The intercom crackled when I pressed her button. "Come up," her voice said, sounding as nervous. As I felt, 3rd floor, apartment 3B. The elevator was one of those old-fashioned cage affairs that seemed designed to make passengers contemplate their life choices during the slow ascent. By the time I reached her floor, I'd run through at least a dozen scenarios of how this evening could go wrong. We were both emotionally fragile, recently divorced, carrying 20-plus years of relationship baggage. Lonely people mistaking proximity for chemistry? The door to 3B opened before I could knock. Victoria stood there, wearing a simple black dress that somehow managed to be both elegant and understated. Her hair was down, falling in soft waves around her shoulders, the first time I'd seen it out of its usual professional updo. She looked beautiful, but more than that, she looked relaxed in a way I hadn't seen before. "You came," she said, and I could hear the relief in her voice. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "Part of me hoped you'd have the good sense to run in the opposite direction." She stepped aside to let me in. Her apartment was exactly what I'd expected, tastefully decorated in neutral tones, everything in its place, the kind of space that suggested someone who valued order and control. But there were small signs of recent upheaval: boxers stacked in corners, empty spaces on bookshelves where things had been removed, the subtle evidence of a life being reconstructed. "I brought wine," I said, offering the bottle I'd spent 20 minutes choosing at the store, though I should warn you, my knowledge of wine extends to reading the price tags. She laughed, taking the bottle and examining the label. "Pinot Noir. Good choice. I was making chicken marsala anyway, so this will pair perfectly." She paused, looking up at me. The admission was so endearingly nervous that it broke some of the tension I'd been carrying. Here was this accomplished, sophisticated woman, worried about impressing me with her dinner party skills. It made her seem more real, more reachable. "Can I help with anything?" I asked, following her into the kitchen. "You can open the wine while I finish the sauce. Fair warning, I haven't cooked for anyone but myself in months. I may be out of practice." At the whole hostess thing, the kitchen was a study in organized efficiency, with professional-grade appliances that looked barely used. As she moved around the space, checking the oven and stirring something that smelled incredible, I realized this was the first time I'd seen her in her natural environment. Away from coffee shops and public spaces, she seemed more grounded, more herself. "This is nice," I said, opening the wine and looking around. "The apartment, I mean. Very you." "Is that a compliment or an observation?" she asked, adjusting the heat under a pan. "Definitely a compliment, though I have to say it's a little intimidating. My place looks like a college dorm compared to this." She turned to face me, leaning against the counter. "Marcus, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Are you nervous?" Now the directness of the question caught me off guard. Terrified, I admitted. "Are you?" "Same." She accepted the glass of wine I offered. Hearn took a sip. "I keep thinking about how long it's been since I've done this. Since I've tried to impress someone. Since I've cared whether someone finds me interesting or attractive." "For what it's worth," I said, "you don't need to try very hard on either count." She smiled, but there was something vulnerable in her expression. Richard used to say I was too intense, too serious, too focused on things that didn't matter. He preferred me when I was quieter. The comment hit me like a physical blow. The idea that someone had spent 23 years systematically dimming Victoria's light, making her question her own worth, was infuriating. But I could see the damage it had done, the way she was still apologizing for taking up space. "He was an idiot," I said simply. "Marcus, no, I'm serious. Anyone who thought you were too much of anything wasn't paying attention to what he had." She stared at me for a long moment, something shifting in her eyes. Then she set down her wine glass, crossed the small distance between us, and kissed me. It wasn't a gentle, tentative first kiss. It was hungry, desperate, full of 23 years of being overlooked and months of careful restraint finally breaking down. Her hands fisted in my shirt, pulling me closer, and I could taste wine and need and something that might have been a relief. When we broke apart, we were both breathing hard. She rested her forehead against mine, eyes closed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't plan that." "Don't apologize," I said, my hand still on her waist. "Not for that." She opened her eyes and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I haven't kissed anyone but my husband in over 20 years. I wasn't sure I'd remember how." "You remember just fine." Timer went off somewhere behind her, breaking the spell. She stepped back, flustered, and moved to check whatever was in the oven. I watched her try to regain her composure, the way she smoothed her hair and adjusted her dress, as if she could somehow undo what had just happened between us. At a table set with actual cloth napkins and matching plates. The food was exceptional. Clearly, she'd been underselling her cooking abilities, but the conversation was stilted. Both of us hyper-aware of the kiss that had shifted the entire dynamic of the evening. "This is amazing," I said, cutting another piece of chicken. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "YouTube mostly," she admitted. After Richard and I separated, I realized I'd never actually learned to cook for pleasure. I'd been making the same rotation of family-friendly meals for 20 years, so I started experimenting. "What else have you been experimenting with?" She considered the question, twirling pasta around her fork. "Painting. I bought an easel and some supplies, set up a little studio in the spare bedroom."
Ow.
"I'm terrible at it, but there's something liberating about making something purely for the joy of it." "Can I see?" "Absolutely not," she said quickly, then laughed. "They're awful. Like embarrassingly bad. But they're mine, you know? For the first time in years, I'm doing something just because I want to, not because it serves some greater purpose." Conversation began to flow more naturally as the wine took effect and we both relaxed into the evening. Victoria told me about her plans to travel places she'd always wanted to see, but had never prioritized. I shared my thoughts about potentially changing careers, maybe starting my own consulting firm instead of working for someone else's vision. "It's strange," she said, as we finished the main course. "I spent so many years building a life with someone else that I forgot what my own dreams looked like. Now I have to figure out what I actually want, not what I thought I should want." "What do you want?" I asked. She was quiet for a moment, considering. "I want to feel alive again. I want to wake up in the morning excited about the day ahead instead of just going through the motions. I want to matter to someone, not as a wife or a mother or an employee, but as myself." The honesty in her answer was breathtaking. Here was a woman who'd had the courage to blow up her entire life in search of authenticity. And she was still brave enough to be vulnerable about what she was looking for. I want that too, I said. Even if it's messy. Even if we don't know what we're doing, especially then. She reached across the table and took my hand, her thumb tracing patterns on my palm. Marcus, I need you to know something. I'm not looking for someone to fix me or save me or complete me. I've done enough work on myself to know that's not how it works. Then what are you looking for? Someone to explore with. Someone who makes me want to be braver, more honest, more myself. Someone who sees me clearly and chooses me anyway. The words hung between us, heavy with possibility. This wasn't a woman looking for a rebound or a distraction. She was offering something real, something that required courage from both of us. What happens now? I asked. She stood up, still holding my hand, and pulled me to my feet. Now we find out if this is as real as it feels. She led me to the living room, where she'd lit candles while I wasn't paying attention. The space felt intimate, romantic in a way that was clearly intentional. She'd been planning this moment, working up the courage to take this leap. Victoria, I started, but she pressed a finger to my lips. I know. We should probably take this slow, she said. I know there are a million reasons why this could be a mistake, but I'm tired of being careful. I'm tired of protecting myself from possibilities. She moved closer, her hands coming up to frame my face. I haven't felt this way in 20 years, Marcus. I haven't felt desired or exciting or worth pursuing. You make me feel like I'm worth the risk. Her words were like a key turning in a lock I didn't even know was there. All the careful distance I'd been maintaining, all the rational arguments about why we should proceed cautiously, crumbled in the face of her raw honesty. You are worth the risk, I said, my voice rougher than I intended. You're worth everything. This time when she kissed me, there was no hesitation, no apology. There was only the two of us, finally honest about what we wanted, finally brave. Enough to reach for something better than what we'd settled for before. The candlelight flickered across her face as she pulled back to look at me, and I saw something in her eyes that took my breath away. It wasn't just desire, though. That was there too. It was hope. It's the kind of tentative, fragile hope that comes after you've given up on something and then discovered it might still be possible after all. Stay, she whispered against my lips. Please stay. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I knew exactly where I wanted to be. I woke up in Victoria's bed to the sound of rain against the windows and the unfamiliar sensation of contentment. Sunlight filtered through sheer curtains, casting everything in a golden haze that made the previous night feel almost dreamlike. Victoria lay beside me, her auburn hair spread across the pillow, one hand resting on my chest, as if even in sleep she didn't want to let go. The night had been a revelation. Not just the physical intimacy, though that had been extraordinary, but the complete abandonment of pretense between us. We'd talked until nearly 3 a.m, sharing stories and secrets and fears we'd never voiced to anyone else. There had been laughter and tears and moments of such perfect understanding that I'd wondered if this was what people meant when they talked about finding their person. Victoria stirred beside me, her eyes fluttering open. For a moment she looked, confused, as if she couldn't quite place where she was or why there was a strange man in her bed. Then memory flooded back, and she smiled, not the careful, controlled smile I'd grown accustomed to, but something radiant and unguarded. Good morning, she whispered, her voice husky with sleep. Good morning. I brushed a strand of hair from her face, marveling at how natural the gesture felt. How are you feeling? She considered the question seriously, as if taking inventory of her emotional state. Different, she said finally. Good, different, but different. Regrets. None, she said without hesitation. You? Just one. Her expression faltered slightly. What's that? That I waited this long to tell you how I felt? Relief flooded her features, followed quickly by something that looked like embarrassment. I have a confession, she said, hiding her face against my shoulder. Last night it had been a very long time since I'd been with anyone. I was terrified I'd forgotten how. I tilted her chin up so I could see her eyes. Victoria, last night was incredible. You were incredible. I felt like a teenager again, she admitted. Nervous and excited and completely out of my depth. But also alive. More alive than I'd felt in years. The honesty in her admission made my chest tight with emotion. Here was this accomplished, sophisticated woman, vulnerable enough to admit she'd felt lost in her own sexuality, brave enough to find her way back to it. What happens now? She asked, echoing my question from the night before. Now, we figure it out as we go, I said. No pressure, no timelines, just us. She nodded, but I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. Victoria was a planner, someone who liked to have contingencies and exit strategies. The uncertainty of what we were building together was probably both thrilling and terrifying for her. I should probably tell you, she said, tracing patterns on my chest with her fingertip. I'm not very good at casual. Who says this has to be casual? She looked up at me, searching my face for something. Marcus, we've known each other for 6 weeks. We're both rebounding from long marriages. Every piece of conventional wisdom says this is a terrible idea. Do you think it's a terrible idea? No, she said quietly. But I'm scared of wanting something this much. I'm scared of getting my hopes up only to have them crushed again. I understood her fear completely. After Sarah's betrayal, after months of feeling like I wasn't enough for the person who was supposed to love me most, the idea of making myself vulnerable again was terrifying. But lying here with Victoria, seeing the way she looked at me like I was something precious and rare, I knew that the risk was worth it. What if we started with honesty? I suggested. Complete honesty about what we're feeling, what we want, what scares us. No games, no pretending to be cooler or more detached than we are. That sounds both wonderful and absolutely terrifying. The best things usually do. She was quiet for a moment, then, okay, complete honesty. I think I'm falling for you, and it's happening faster than I'm comfortable with. I want to see where this goes, but I also want to protect myself from getting hurt again. I have no idea how to balance those two things. Her words hit me like a physical force. The courage it took to be that vulnerable, that direct about her feelings, was staggering. It deserved the same honesty in return. I'm falling for you too, I said. It scares the hell out of me because I never expected to feel this way again. I thought I was broken, that whatever part of me was capable of this kind of connection had died with my marriage. But you don't feel broken now? With you? No, with you? I feel like myself again. The person I was before I started settling for less than I deserved. We spent the morning in bed, not making love, but simply talking, learning the geography of each other's thoughts and dreams. Victoria told me about her childhood in Oregon, about parents who'd expected perfection and a younger brother who'd always been the favorite. I shared stories about growing up in Detroit, about a father who'd worked 3 jobs to support our family and taught me that love was something you did, not something you said. Around noon, reality began to intrude. Victoria had plans to meet her daughter Sarah for lunch, their weekly tradition since the divorce. I could see her reluctance to leave, the way she kept finding excuses to delay getting dressed. Go, I said finally, kissing her forehead. Sarah needs you. What about what I need? The question slipped out before she could stop it, and I saw her flush with embarrassment at the admission. What do you need? More time with you? More time to figure out what this is before I have to face the real world again? I'm not going anywhere, I assured her. This doesn't disappear just because you leave the apartment. How can you be so sure? Because what happened between us last night wasn't just physical. It wasn't just about being lonely or needing validation. This is real, Victoria. It's messy and complicated and probably premature, but real. She studied my face as if memorizing it, then nodded slowly. Okay, but I want to see you tonight. If you're free, I'm free. Good. She kissed me softly, a promise rather than a goodbye. I'll call you after lunch. I spent the afternoon in a state I hadn't experienced since high school, completely preoccupied with thoughts of a woman. Everything reminded me of Victoria, the smell of coffee, the sound of rain, the memory of her laughter. I found myself grinning at random moments, then worrying that I was reading too much into what had happened between us. My phone rang at 3:30. Victoria's name on the screen made my heart rate spike like I was 16 again. How did lunch go? I asked without a preamble. Interesting, she said, and I could hear something in her voice I couldn't identify. Sarah asked me why I looked different. Different how? Happier, she said. Relaxed. She hasn't seen me look that way in years. Victoria paused. I almost told her about you. What stopped you? Fear, I think. Fear that talking about it would somehow jinx it. And also, not sure I'm ready to explain you to anyone else yet. I'm still trying to figure out what you mean to me. What do you think I mean to you? She was quiet for a long moment. I think you might be the person who helps me remember who I am when I'm not trying to be what everyone else needs me to be. The simplicity of the statement took my breath away. In all my years with Sarah, through all the counseling sessions and desperate attempts to save our marriage, neither of us had ever articulated what we needed from each other with such clarity. Victoria, I said, not sure how to respond to something. So perfectly honest. I know it's a lot of pressure to put on someone, she said quickly. And I don't mean you have to fix me or save me or anything like that. I just mean, with you I feel like myself. The best version of myself. You feel the same way about me, I said. Like coming home to a place I didn't know I'd been missing. God, we're ridiculous, she said, but I could hear the smile in her voice. 6 weeks and we're talking like we're destined soulmates. Maybe we are. Marcus, ... I'm serious. Maybe the timing is perfect because we're both finally ready for something real. Maybe we had to go through everything we went through to become the people who could appreciate what we have now. You really believe that? I really do. She was quiet again, processing. I want to believe it too. But I also want to be smart about this. I want to take it day by day and not get so caught up in the possibility of forever that we forget to actually enjoy what's happening right now. Deal, I said. Day by day, but with complete honesty about how we're feeling. Complete honesty, she agreed. Starting with this. I can't stop thinking about last night. Not the way you looked at me, the way you touched me. I haven't felt desired like that in I can't even remember how long. Her words sent heat coursing through me. Victoria, ... I'm not finished, she said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. I keep thinking about tonight, about being alone with you again. About all the things we didn't have time to explore. What time should I come over? Now, she said immediately, then laughed. But I should probably wait until after Sarah goes back to her dorm. 7? 7, I confirmed. Should I bring anything? Just yourself, and maybe you could. Stay again, if you want to? I want to. Good, because I have something I want to tell you. Something I realized during lunch with Sarah. What's that? I realized that for the first time in 20 years, I'm not pretending to be happy. I actually am happy, and that's because of you. The words hit me like a revelation. In all my searching. For what was wrong with my marriage? What was missing? What needed to be fixed? I'd never considered that the problem might be simpler than I'd thought. Maybe it wasn't about communication techniques or date nights or couples therapy. It was just about finding the right person. Someone who saw you clearly and chose you anyway. Victoria, I said, my voice rough with emotion. I know it's fast, she said. I know we should probably slow down, be more cautious. But I don't want to. For once in my life, I want to be brave enough to reach for something that feels this right. Then let's be brave together. Together, she repeated, like she was testing out the word. I like the sound of that. See you at 7? See you at 7? And Marcus? Yeah, thank you. Or, for making me feel like I'm worth taking. Risk on. After she hung up, I sat in my apartment staring at my phone, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening between us. Less than 24 hours ago, we'd been two broken people sharing coffee and war stories. Now we were talking about being brave together, about the possibility of building something real from the ruins of our former lives. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like the first genuinely hopeful thing that had happened to me. In years, 3 weeks later, I was standing in the produce section of Whole Foods, debating between organic and conventional strawberries, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Marcus Reeves. I turned to find Sarah, my ex-wife, pushing a cart loaded with the same health-conscious groceries she'd always favored. She looked exactly the same blonde bob, perfectly styled, workout clothes that probably cost more than my monthly utilities. That practiced smile that had once charmed me, and eventually made me feel like a stranger in my own home. Said, surprised by how little I felt seeing her. No anger, no sadness, just a mild curiosity about what she wanted. How are you? I'm good. Really good. She glanced at my cart, which contained ingredients for the dinner I was planning to cook. For Victoria. You look ... different. Happier. I am happier. I'm glad. She seemed to mean it, which was more grace than I'd expected from her. I've been wanting to call you, actually, to apologize. Sarah, you don't need to. Yes, I do. She moved closer, lowering her voice, even though the produce section was mostly empty. The way things ended between us, the things I said during the divorce proceedings, I was angry and hurt, and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair. Studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda, but found only what appeared to be genuine remorse. We both said things we didn't mean. Maybe, but I was the one who cheated. I was the one who broke our promises. She took a breath. I told myself it was because we'd grown apart, because you weren't paying attention to me anymore. But the truth is, I was just too much of a coward to have an honest conversation about what wasn't working. The admission should have vindicated me, should have made me feel like I'd been right all along. Instead, it just made me sad for both of us, for all the years we'd wasted pretending to be happy, for all the conversations we'd never had. We both played a part in it falling apart, I said. But it doesn't matter anymore. We're both moving on. Are you seeing someone? The question seemed to slip out before she could stop it, and I saw her immediately regret asking. Yes, I said. Simply, is it serious? I thought about Victoria, about the way she'd looked at me that morning when I'd left her apartment to run errands, sleepy and content and beautiful. About the plans we'd been making for the weekend, the easy way we'd fallen into a routine of shared meals and long conversations, and the kind of intimacy I'd forgotten was possible. Yes, I said again. It's serious. Sarah nodded, and I saw something that might have been wistfulness cross her features. Good for you. You deserve to be happy. So do you. I am. With David. She gestured to her ring finger, where a new diamond sparkled. We got engaged last month. Congratulations. Ow. I found that I meant it. Whatever David gave her that I couldn't, whatever he saw in her that I'd stopped seeing, I hoped it worked out better for both of them than it had for us. Thank you. She shifted uncomfortably, as if she wanted to say more, but wasn't sure how. Marcus, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you think we ever really loved each other? Or were we just ... compatible?
What?
The question caught me off guard with its honesty.
What?
It was the kind of conversation we should have had years ago, when there might still have been time to fix things. I think we loved the idea of each other, I said carefully. I think we loved the life we built together. But I'm not sure we ever really saw each other clearly. That's what I think too. She looked relieved to have someone else voice. She'd been thinking. I loved the security you represented, the way you made me feel safe and stable. But I don't think I ever really appreciated who you were as a person. And I loved how put together you always seemed, how you made our life look perfect from the outside. But I never bothered to find out what was happening on the inside. We stood there for a moment, two people who'd shared 15 years of their lives, finally having the conversation that might have saved their marriage if they'd been brave enough to have it sooner. I hope she sees you, Sarah said quietly. Whoever she is, hope she really sees you. She does, I said, and felt the truth of it in my chest. And I see her. Sarah smiled, and for the first time since our divorce, it looked genuine. Then, you're both lucky. After she left, I finished my shopping in a strange mood, not upset, exactly, but contemplative. Running into Sarah had reminded me of how different things were with Victoria, how much more present and engaged I felt in this relationship. With Sarah, I'd always felt like I was performing the role of good husband, hitting the expected marks without ever truly connecting. With Victoria, I felt like myself flawed and complicated and human, but seen and accepted anyway. By the time I arrived at Victoria's apartment, the encounter with Sarah had faded into background noise. Victoria opened the door wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, no makeup. looking more beautiful than any woman had a right to look on a random Wednesday evening. "You're late," she said, but she was smiling as she pulled me inside for a kiss. "Sorry. Ran into my ex-wife at the grocery store." Victoria pulled back to study my face. "How was that?" Surprisingly civilized. She apologized for how things ended. Told me she's engaged to the guy she left me for. Set the grocery bags on her kitchen counter. Mostly it just reminded me how different this is. Different how? With you, I don't feel like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not. I don't feel like I have to earn your affection or prove I'm worth being with. I just ... am. Victoria's expression softened. "You know what's funny? I was thinking something similar today. I had a meeting with my lawyer to finalize some details about the property settlement, and for the first time since this whole process started, I wasn't angry or bitter about what I was losing. I was excited about what I was gaining, which is freedom. The chance to build something real with someone who actually wants to be with me." She moved closer, her arms sliding around my waist. "The chance to be with someone who makes me feel like I'm enough, exactly as I am." I kissed her then, tasting the promise in her words. This was what I'd been searching for without even knowing it. Not just love, but recognition. Not just passion, but presence. "What's for dinner?" she asked, when we broke apart. "Seafood risotto." "I thought I'd try to impress you with my culinary skills." "You've already impressed me in all the ways that matter," she said, but she was looking at the ingredients I'd brought with obvious appreciation, though I have to admit, I'm curious to see what you can do with a kitchen. I'd been cooking more in recent years, partly out of necessity after the divorce, and partly because I'd discovered I enjoyed the meditative quality of preparing a meal. But cooking for Victoria felt different. It was an act of care, a way of showing her she was worth the effort. She sat at the kitchen island with a glass of wine, watching me prep ingredients and asking questions about technique. There was something deeply intimate about the domestic scene. The easy way we moved around each other in the space, the comfortable silence punctuated by conversation about nothing and everything. "Can I tell you something?" Victoria said, as I stirred the risotto. "Always. I called my mother yesterday, told her about you." I looked up from the pot, surprised. In all our conversations, Victoria had mentioned her parents only in passing and never with particular warmth. "How did that go?" "About as well as expected. She wanted to know if you have a good job, if you're financially stable, if you've been married before." Victoria took a sip of wine. "She didn't ask if you would make me happy. Do I make you happy? Ridiculously happy?" She smiled, so happy it scares me sometimes. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to go wrong. Nothing goes wrong? What if this is just ... good? Then I guess I'll have to learn how to accept good things when they happen to me. She was quiet for a moment. Richard used to say I was too pessimistic, always looking for problems that didn't exist. Maybe he was right. Maybe you just hadn't found anything worth being optimistic about. The words seemed to hit her like a physical force. She stared at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between surprise and gratitude, and something deeper that made my chest tight. "You have this way of saying exactly what I need to hear," she said softly. "It's like you see right through all my defenses to the person I'm trying to become. I see the person you already are. Brave and honest and strong enough to rebuild your entire life because you refused to settle for less than you deserved." "Marcus," she set down her wine glass and came around the island to where I was standing. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Where do you see this going?" "Because I need to know if we're building towards something or if this is just ... temporary." The question hung between us, weighted with vulnerability and hope and fear. I knew my answer could change everything, could either deepen what we had, or send her running if she wasn't ready for the truth. "I see us," I said simply. "I see us figuring it out together, day by day, but with the intention of building something that lasts. I see us introducing each other to our friends, meeting each other's families, making plans that extend beyond next week. What if I told you I've been thinking about asking you to move in with me?" The question caught me completely off guard. "Have you? My lease is up in 2 months. Your place is bigger than mine. It would make financial sense, and we already spend most nights together anyway." She was talking faster now, nervous energy making her fidget with her sleeves. But I also know it's fast, probably too fast. And if you think it's a terrible idea, I silenced her with a kiss. Slow and thorough and full of everything I couldn't quite put into words yet. When we broke apart, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Is that a yes?" she whispered. "That's a yes. To move in together, to meet families, to build something that lasts. To all of it." She buried her face against my neck, and I felt her shoulders shake with what might have been relief or joy or both. "I love you," she said so quietly I almost missed it. The words hit me like lightning, illuminating everything I'd been feeling but hadn't dared to name. "I love you too," I said, and felt the truth of it settle into my bones. We held each other. In her kitchen, the risotto forgotten on the stove, both of us overwhelmed by the magnitude of what we'd just admitted. It had been less than 2 months since that first conversation in the coffee shop, but somehow it felt like we'd been building toward this moment our entire lives. "The risotto is burning," Victoria said eventually, though she made no move too. "Let go of me, let it burn," I said. "We'll order pizza." She laughed, pulling back to look at me. "I love you," she said again, as if testing out how the words felt. "I love you too. I promise you this time it's going to be different. This time it's going to be real." "How can you be so sure?" "Because this time, we're choosing each other with our eyes wide open. This time, we know what we're fighting." For 6 months later, I was carrying the last box from Victoria's old apartment into our shared home when she appeared in the doorway, holding 2 glasses of champagne and wearing the smile that still had the power to stop me in my tracks. "That's it," she announced. "Officially moved in." The house we'd chosen together was nothing like either of our previous homes. It was smaller than what we could afford, but it had character-exposed beams, a stone fireplace, windows that let in more light than seemed physically possible. Most importantly, it felt like us. It's like a place where 2 people could build something new without the ghosts of their former lives lurking in every corner. "How does it feel?" I asked, accepting the champagne and pulling her close with my free arm. "Terrifying," she said honestly. "Perfect." We'd been living together unofficially for months, but making it official by signing a lease together had felt monumental. It was the first major decision we'd made as a unit, the first real step toward building a future that belonged to both of us. "Had any regrets?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from the way she was looking at me. "Only that we didn't do this sooner." She clinked her glass against mine. 2 new beginnings. 2 new beginnings. The champagne was excellent. Victoria had insisted on getting something special to mark the occasion, but I barely tasted it. I was too distracted by the way the afternoon light caught in her hair, by the contentment radiating from her like warmth from a fire. "I have something for you," she said, setting down her glass and disappearing into the bedroom. She returned, carrying a wrapped package about the size of a picture frame. I know we said no housewarming gifts, but I couldn't resist. Inside was a painting, one of hers, though far better than the embarrassingly bad work she'd described months ago. It was an abstract piece in blues and golds, all movement and light, somehow managing to capture the feeling of possibility itself. "Victoria, this is beautiful," I said, genuinely awed. "When did you paint this?" "Last week. I've been working on it since we decided to move in together." She looked nervous, the way she always did when sharing something deeply personal. "It's called New Chapter." I stared at the painting, seeing in its flowing lines and vibrant colors everything we'd been building together, the courage to start over, the faith to trust in something uncertain, the joy of discovering you could surprise yourself at any age. "I love it," I said, "and I love you for making it. Where should we hang it?" I looked around our living room, taking in the mix of furniture from both our old lives arranged in new configurations. "Right there," I said, pointing to the wall above the fireplace. "Center stage." So we hung the painting together, arguing good-naturedly about whether it was level. I was struck by how domestic the scene was, how normal. After months of intensity and revelation, and the constant amazement of discovering someone who truly saw you, we'd settled into something even better. Partnership, Marcus, Victoria said as we stepped back to admire our handiwork. "Yeah, remember that night at the coffee shop when you asked me what I wanted? I remember I said I wanted to feel alive again, I wanted to matter to someone." She turned to face me fully. "I got that. But I also got something I didn't even know I was missing. What's that? I got someone who makes me want to be braver. Someone who sees my potential, even when I can't see it myself. Her voice caught slightly. I got a partner. The word hit me with unexpected force. Partner. Not boyfriend. Not lover, though we were those things too. But partner. Someone who shared the work of building a life, who showed up for the mundane moments as fully as the extraordinary ones. You know what I got, I said, reaching for her hands. Tell me. I got to remember what it feels like to choose someone every day instead of just being chosen once and then taking it for granted. She smiled, the radiant, unguarded smile that had become my favorite sight in the world. We're pretty good at this, aren't we? At what? At being brave together? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Victoria's contact picture filled the screen up. Photo I'd taken of her painting in the spare bedroom, completely absorbed in her work, beautiful in her concentration. You're literally standing right in front of me, I said, declining the call. Why are you calling me? I'm not. She looked confused, then pulled out her own phone. Oh my God, Marcus, look. She showed me her screen where a text message from her daughter Sarah was displayed. Mom, I'm bringing someone home for dinner next weekend. His name is Jake, and I think you're going to love him. Can't wait for you to meet him, Peas. I'm so happy you're happy. You deserve this. She wants to introduce us to her boyfriend, Victoria said, wonder in her voice. She wants to bring him here to our home. The significance wasn't lost on either of us. For months, Sarah had been cautiously supportive of our relationship, but kept her distance, still processing her parents' divorce and uncertain about her mother's new life. This felt like acceptance, like an invitation into the next phase of becoming a family in a new configuration. Are you ready for that? I asked. Are you? Meeting my daughter's boyfriend is pretty serious relationship territory, I thought about. It about the implications of expanding our carefully constructed bubble to include the next generation, the complexities of blended families and step relationships, and all the ways this could get complicated. Bring it on, I said. I want to meet the guy who's making Sarah happy. I want him to meet the woman who's made me believe in love again. Victoria's eyes filled with tears she didn't try to hide. God, I love you. I love your certainty. Your willingness to jump in with both feet. I love you too. All of your caution and your courage, your strength and your vulnerability. The way you paint your feelings and overthink everything and still manage to be the bravest person I know. We kissed then, surrounded by boxes and champagne glasses, and the painting that captured everything we'd built together. It wasn't the desperate, hungry kiss of new lovers or the careful, measured kiss of people still figuring each other out. It was the kiss of two people who'd found their way home. So what now? Victoria asked when we broke apart. Now we unpack, make dinner in our kitchen. We christened every room in this house. I grinned at her. We live our life. Our life. She repeated, testing out the phrase. I like the sound of that. As the sun set through our new windows, painting everything in golden light, I realized that this was the moment I'd been unconsciously waiting for my entire adult life. Not the grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but this, the quiet certainty of building something lasting with someone who chose to stay. Victoria curled against my side on our couch, both of us tired from moving, but reluctant to end the day. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, work deadlines and family dynamics and all the ordinary complications of two lives intertwining. But tonight, we were exactly where we belonged. Marcus, Victoria said sleepily. Thank you for what this time, for proving that it's never too late to start over, for showing me that the best chapters of our lives don't have to be behind us. I tightened my arms around her, breathing in the scent of her hair and the promise of all our tomorrows. Thank you for being brave enough to let me love you. Always, she whispered against my chest. Always. And as I felt her breathing slow into sleep, I knew that whatever came next, we'd face it together. Two people who'd learned the hard way that love isn't about finding someone perfect, but about finding someone worth fighting for, worth growing with, worth choosing again and again. We'd both whispered that we hadn't felt like this in 20 years. Now I knew why. Because this partnership, this joy, this absolute certainty that we were exactly where we belonged, This was worth waiting a lifetime to find. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.